Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call the regular meeting of council to order. Our clerk today will be Ms. Skye Snellgrove. And I'd ask for a procedural motion to proceed in camera. Moved by Councillor Thorpe, seconded by Councillor Hemmons. All those in favor? Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the April 4th regular meeting of Council. I'd like to first recognize that we are gathered on the traditional territory of the Snuneymuxw First Nation. Our clerk tonight will be Ms. Skye Snellgrove. Tonight's regular meeting of Council will be held in accordance with the Community Charter and Council Procedure Bylaw 2018, number 7272. The question period sign-up sheet is on the table by the double doors to my left for agenda items only. If during the meeting any member of the gallery has a question regarding an agenda item, please write down your name and the agenda item on the sheet. Members of council have been given the authority to join meetings electronically, and you can refer to guideline sheets for reference. And I'm pleased to announce that Councillors Bonner and Brown, who are not physically here tonight, are here with us electronically. The first item on the agenda is the introduction of late items. Ms. Snellgrove, we have none tonight.
That's correct.
A motion for adoption of the agenda. Moved Councillor Thorpe, seconded Councillor Hemmons. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Motion for adoption of the minutes is circulated. Moved Councillor Thorpe, seconded Councillor Armstrong. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. I have a bit of a mayor's report tonight. I'll start off by recognizing that the city and the regional district of Nanaimo are pleased to announce their participation in the International Council for Local Environmental Initiatives, another acronym for those of you who love them, ICLEI. I suppose you could say ICLEI, Canada's Agents of Change project through the formation of a climate change community volunteer program. As the lead applicant, the city will receive $15,000 from ICLEI Canada to support a regional project. It'll run from January 2022 to March 2023, with the volunteer program expected to launch in the fall/winter of 2022. This is a very positive step for the city, and it recognizes that we're all working together for a more sustainable future. Now, I know that this was raised some meetings ago, and that is the issue of closed captioning for those of you who watch on Shaw Cable. What I can tell you is that with the good work of Ms. Snellgrove, Shaw advises us as follows, that Shaw Spotlight expects to provide broadcast airtime to Nanaimo City Council on the local community channel for as long as the city requests it. In addition, Shaw Spotlight is currently exploring closed captioning options for city councils across the country, and we hope to offer recommendations in the near future. And mercifully, they agreed that and do not recommend that the City of Nanaimo invest in any closed captioning of services or technology until they've conducted their investigation into viable options. So stay tuned. Hopefully that will be coming. Now, I want to say something really wonderful about a very fine artist in our community, Carl de Ruyter. His street was torn up on Arrow Road for a fair period of time. And instead of, like some citizens, complaining that the city was taking too long or it wasn't done right or whatever complaint you might have, instead Mr. de Ruyter took some photos of the crew, the city crew, and then created a rather magnificent painting, which is available to see on the city website. And on Friday, he presented it to myself and CEO Rudolph and the crew involved, celebrating the water main and sanitary sewer work, which is nearing completion on Arrow Road and Nottingham Drive. The painting depicts a scene of heavy equipment and the city crew on location, and was presented to the crew and ourselves with much appreciation. I just want to say that this was a tremendously warm and gracious gesture. Mr. de Ruyter is an artist whose works are not cheap. He is a recognized artist, and this is an extremely generous gift to the City of Nanaimo, and it meant everything to the crew and all those at Public Works who often work as the unsung heroes of all the stuff that's below the ground and occasionally above it that our city relies on to survive and that we exist in every day. So a very big shout out to Carl de Ruyter tonight and for his generosity. I'm also very pleased to announce, for those of you who pay attention to arts and culture in this community, that this is the 150th anniversary of Nanaimo's concert band. It was formed in 1872 and is the oldest and continuously operating concert band in Canada, and is recognized and has been on many occasions as one of the finest in our country. It was formed actually 2 years before Nanaimo officially became a city. We weren't formed as a city until 1874, and they have performed at every armistice ceremony, for those of us who are older. Remembrance Day for those of you who are younger, since World War I. The concert band had the honor of receiving the first Excellence in Culture Award presented by the city in 1997. As it is our oldest community band, all rehearsals, performance times, fundraising of the musicians is voluntary, and members range from all ages, walks of life, and live in this community. And indeed, if you're familiar with some of the membership, some of them have been at it many decades, joining the band at a very young age and continuing to perform. This historical milestone is being celebrated this month. There's a concert at the Port Theatre on Sunday, April the 10th. I don't know if there are any tickets left, but if you have an opportunity, you should buy them and attend, support the band, but also recognize this quite literally, like the salesman's pitch, is a probable once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. They have received letters of congratulations from Buckingham Palace and the BC and Canadian governments. And I'm delighted tonight to ask Sherry Barker, a band member, who's with us tonight in the back. Stand up, she's in full uniform. She stepped away from rehearsal tonight, getting ready for Sunday, to attend for the report and to represent her colleagues. And I just want to say to her tonight and all the members of the band and who supported them through literally a century and a half, we owe you a real debt of gratitude. I'm excited by the prospect of the performance on Sunday. I'm looking forward to attending with some of my family and the gala dinner afterwards. So thank you so much. Look forward to Sunday. And as I say, if you haven't got your ticket, get it now. Thank you so much. And I'm just going to offer one statistic to give a bit of a preface, if you will, or an introduction to Ms. Manhas's remarks later tonight. I can happily tell you that the latest figures provided by our General Manager of Development Services tell us that the city has approved building permits in the first 3 months of this year alone for 503 housing units, and the total value of building permits in the first 3 months of 2022 is $120 million. Nanaimo has been discovered, and people want to move and live here, and we are working hard through the construction industry in this community and with council support to ensure that people have places to live. Again, 503 units and $120 million in building permits. That is cause for a banner evening. That is my report. We have nothing to rise and report on tonight, Ms. Snellgrove. The next is of presentations, and tonight I'm delighted to welcome two former distinguished members of City Council who remain distinguished even though they're not on council. Former councillors Merv Unger and Diane Brennan, along with Michaela Torres, who are here to make a presentation on the subject of welcoming immigrants and refugees to Nanaimo. Delighted to see you all here tonight, and I see you're ably supported by Terry Flower, who could protect anyone from any force of evil in the world. Mr. Unger, welcome.
Your worship and councillors, good evening, and it is great to be back in this chamber again. Thank you for the opportunity to address you on a very serious issue. Everyone is aware there is a worldwide humanitarian crisis that impacts all of us. Canada has pledged to welcome 9,000 Ukrainian refugees to our country. More than 4 million women and children and seniors have fled to other countries as Russia continues its brutal invasion of Ukraine. We don't know the depth of the impact on Canada or BC or even specifically Nanaimo. Former Councillor Diane Brennan and I discussed how we as a community can play a role. Diane will focus on that later, And Mika Torres is also here, as the mayor mentioned. She's the executive director of the Central Vancouver Island Multicultural Society. This is the closest we've ever come to see a war, or to almost feel like we're in it. Live television reports and social media take us right to the front lines, where we can see the devastation. Homes are being bombed along with schools, daycare centers, hospitals, and seniors' homes, and they're targeting civilians specifically. And it's devastating to millions of people. The refugees coming out of this war are much different than any we've ever seen before. They are mothers and their children and seniors. They are fleeing with only the bare necessities they can stuff into a backpack. Families are without fathers who have been conscripted to stay behind and fight for their country. Many refugees are being absorbed in Europe, specifically Poland, which has been the epicenter, but they will spread around the world, Canada included. Canada Border Agency reported on the weekend that 3,000 Ukrainians have already arrived in Canada since the start of the war on February 24th. We have not seen any arriving in Nanaimo yet, but the first priority for resettlement is always in communities where refugees would feel the most at home, those with large Ukrainian populations. Our own immigrant settlement office in Nanaimo expects up to 50 individuals per year from all refugees and immigrants from various countries. And our federal government is issuing special visas for 3-year stay in Canada, after which many of them would be expected to return to their homeland. But that's not an unreasonable conclusion, because the makeup of the refugee groups, mothers and children. There's no guarantees that families will be reunited after the war, if that ever happens. The life expectancy of those on the military front lines is very low. Some disrupted families may opt to stay in Canada. Even if adult refugees want to return to their home in Ukraine, by the time that 3-year visa expires, there will be lots of children who have aged to the point of being Canadianized. Solid roots can be connected in that time frame. Will they want to return to a place where they have nothing but nightmarish memories of? As well, there's a big question about what they will have to go home to. I'm in contact with some of the aid workers in Ukraine, and they report that all the infrastructure is obliterated. Entire towns and villages are gone. And how many people will want to go back and live under Russian occupation? After a safe life in Canada, which already has a large population of Ukrainian descent, will they want to stay here and bring separated family members to Canada as immigrants later on? I've focused on the Ukraine situation because they are in the forefront of our minds right now, because it's an active situation. But Nanaimo has many immigrants from many other countries as well, and we need to look at all of them and make them feel welcome in our community. The federal government has said it will take in 40,000 Afghan refugees and 9,000 Ukrainians, and there are many, many others from various other countries. We'll be available to answer questions at the completion of our presentation. And now I'll ask Mika from the Multicultural Society to outline what is needed specifically in Nanaimo. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Unger. Good evening and welcome to Council.
Good evening, thank you. And before I begin, I'd like to respectfully acknowledge that we are on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of Nanaimo peoples. So thank you so much for your time this evening, your worship and councils. My name is Michaela, and I am the Executive Director for Central Vancouver Island Multicultural Society. And CVIMS is a social service organization that provides settlement, employment, and language support to newcomers and refugees to Canada. On a yearly basis, CVIMS, on average, welcomes 1,600 newcomers to the community. This includes both permanent residents and refugees who have made Nanaimo and the surrounding areas their home. The top 5 source countries include Syria, China, India, Philippines, and South Korea. Over the summer, CVIMS was invited by Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada to submit a proposal to become a resettlement assistance program. So as you may or may not know, there is a limited number of settlement organizations that hold this designation, and I'm happy to announce that CVIMS secured that designation. So moving forward, we will be serving government-assisted refugees who will be moving to Nanaimo and the surrounding areas as well. So the RAP program actually provides immediate and essential services to government-assisted refugees within their first 4 to 6 weeks upon their arrival in Canada. So this includes airport pickup and us dropping them off in their temporary housing in the community as well. With the arrival of both refugees and permanent residents, having a welcome reception would be a great way to welcome our newcomers, to make them feel at home into their new community. CVIMS believes that the welcome reception would provide a space where newcomers would feel welcome and included. And thank you for your time in considering this proposal as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And finally, a Freeman of the City.
I didn't have my parking pass with me today. Yes, of course. And
Somehow we knew,
and
Councillor
your
Thorpe
parking machine is broken.
Well, it took my $5.75 to I can tell you.
Okay, well, I will begin. Good evening, Mayor Krogh and councillors. We're here tonight to ask that council consider restoring the welcoming reception for new immigrants. Before I speak on the matter, I want to acknowledge and show my gratitude to the Coast Salish people of the Snuneymuxw First Nation, on whose territory we live and work. I also acknowledge my history and my responsibility for reconciliation. In 2012, Nanaimo City Council unanimously agreed to ask the Central Vancouver Island Multicultural Society to co-sponsor with the city a reception to welcome new immigrants to our community. It was agreed that the event would be held at the Vancouver Island Conference Centre. This event was intended to demonstrate Mayor and Council's sincerity, respect, and gratitude to immigrants who chose Nanaimo as their home. The city's Social Planning Committee worked in partnership with the Multicultural Society to plan the event and to manage the invitations. The event was first held in 2012 and was a constant for 6 years. You guys can do that math. Each year, the chief of the Snuneymuxw or his representative gave a warm welcome to our guests. I know from speaking to many participants at this event that the welcome had a powerful effect upon them. The mayor, too, welcomed immigrants and thanked them for choosing Nanaimo. He highlighted the economic and cultural benefits for the city. He introduced our MLA and MP and thanked them for attending. And I tell you this to show you that it was a very gala event. The chair of the Multicultural Society was also asked to speak. However, the event was not all earnest speakers. At one event, a Snuneymuxw elder gave the children instruments, and they sang and played their music with them. In addition, the RCMP sent representatives in their official red uniforms. Many attendees happily took the opportunity to have their photo taken with the officers and to have a short, friendly chat. To some, this was a new experience. Service organizations in the regional district, as well as the city of Nanaimo, sent representatives, set up information booths, and engaged with the participants and answered many questions. Appetizers, finger foods, coffee, tea, and soft drinks were set out for the guests. Conversations were started, understanding expanded, and perhaps even friendships were begun. Should you decide to sponsor this event this year, we suggest that as the attendees leave, each be given a certificate of welcome from the city of Nanaimo as a show of your sincerity. Thank you again for the opportunity to present to you this evening, and we encourage you to continue this worthwhile event. We believe it is a powerful welcome that will have a lasting impression on immigrants and refugees as they become our new settlers. Thank you for your consideration, and if you want to ask some questions, I'd be happy to answer your questions.
Thank you very much, Diane. I'm going to be informal at this point.
Good.
Councillor Martman?
Thank you. Thank you for the presentations from all three of you. I can't think of anything more beautiful than a powerful welcome. I'm not clear exactly, and we don't need to know why it ended, but I'm just wondering, what day was it celebrated? Was it July 1st, or was it was another day?
It depended on the year, the timing for the two organizations, the city and the Multicultural Society, to get together, to do the plans. The Multicultural Society had records, so they know who were immigrants to the city. They prepared invitations on behalf of the mayor and council. They brought those invitations to the city, who paid the postage, which was very welcome. And so it really depended. This time, we had a discussion about when it might be possible, and we thought if you'd made a decision tonight and agreed, then, well, it was given to the Social Planning Committee for them to work with the Multicultural Society. So whomever you would appoint to be the city's lead on this would start working with them. We thought that likely there will be, there are now lots of refugee families, and there likely will be immigrants from Ukraine at that time. So it would expand the numbers of people. And we thought you're a good council, you guys work hard, you could probably accomplish it to have the reception in September. Just off the top of our head, we planned that out. Thought September would be a good time.
Before I go to Councillors Bonner and Thorpe, I did note that what can't be seen on the screen tonight, that Mr. Lindsay, Mr. Rudolph, and Ms. Mercer were putting their three heads together, which tells me something might be afoot. So I'm going to turn to Mr. Rudolph before I go to the other two councillors who've requested to speak. Mr. Rudolph.
Your Worship, we're just conferring that there is a budget envelope available for this if you wish. If you wanted a little staff report or a little context, we could bring it to the Finance and Audit on the 2 weeks out. That would probably be a more comprehensive way to set the stage for this in terms of your response, if we were given that instruction to do that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rudolph. Councillor Thorpe, and then Councillor Bonner.
Thank you. Thank you. Through you to former Councillor Brennan. You speak as well as always. Great to see you and to hear you. I'm surprised though when you say the last event was 2018. Was it that long ago?
I believe it was.
Sorry.
I just did some, Googling, and I think that I found that the last one was 2018.
Well, I won't doubt your research.
Well, you're welcome to.
I guess my point is, Diane, I certainly recall going to several of these events, and they were extremely worthwhile. And as you referenced, the immigrant children having an opportunity, in some cases the parents as well, having an opportunity to get photos taken with the Mounties in their red surge was just, they were just blown away by this. And it was a totally new experience that the police force was approachable and there to help them. What a great learning experience. No, I ask about the date because I had just assumed that this was no longer happening due to COVID. And I certainly don't recall council ever canceling or deciding to cancel this program. So I'll be interested in the report, and I think Mr. Rudolph's suggestion is a good one. If council can get a report at the Finance and Audit Committee in a couple of weeks, then we can go from there. But thank you, all of you, for coming tonight and I guess reviving the idea of this reception. Thank you.
Well, we have high hopes. We respect this council a lot.
Thank you, and you've not lost your ability to try and persuade an audience either.
I just want to add that the only thing I know about the budget was that council passed a motion that included a $2,000 budget, and when it got to the mayor's office, it wasn't enough, and the mayor opened his coffers, added to it. I don't know how much. Okay, I'll leave it at that.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Bonner?
Thank you, Your Worship, and thanks very much for the presentation. You stole a bit of my thunder because I was doing a fair amount of research on our budget over the last couple of months, and that is a line item. It's a lot more than $2,000. And I would definitely like to see this thing going forward. And I can tell you that there's a couple of line items in that budget that aren't being used that should not be. I would definitely consider moving them over into that one so we can have a really good celebration and kick it off again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Gesselbrock and then Councillor Hemmons.
Thanks, Your Worship. Thanks for this, and I'm just curious if we need a motion for this report. Oh, yeah.
I think I heard you
wait
make a
till the
motion that
speaker's
staff provide us with a report for the Finance and Audit Committee meeting respecting this matter in all aspects. Yes? And seconded? Councillor Armstrong, all those in favor? Any opposed? None? Councillor Brown, you want to say something? Councillor Hemmons, you're both off the list. I'm going to say something a little politically dangerous tonight because I think it's part of
Sit down.
recognizing what's been said tonight and noted about this ceremony, and particularly the role of the RCMP in this ceremony. They are a symbol of Canada, internationally recognized. And they played their role as agents of the Government of Canada in the implementation and enforcement of the rules around the residential school system. And yet it's fair to say that even amongst many Indigenous Canadians and certainly new Canadians, being identified with them and recognizing, as Councillor Thorpe has so well pointed out, that people have been for centuries now coming to a country where the police are recognized as your friends, not your enemies. There is an element of the recognition of our past and a recognition of our history as a nation, that at the same ceremonies where the chief and a representative of Snuneymuxw First Nation is gathered, that everybody is working together to welcome new Canadians, just as the Snuneymuxw First Nation welcomed the first colonists here and assisted them in helping form what a city that is now approaching its 150th anniversary of its official creation. I think this is a marvelous opportunity for us all to come together, to recognize our complex and wonderful history as a country. It's both good and bad, and to recognize the hope that this nation represents for many people around the world, about a nation where people of diverse origins and beliefs and views, orientation, whatever may differentiate one from another, have an opportunity to prosper, to succeed, to provide a beacon of hope into the world. As former Councillor Unger started off tonight, none of us can be blind to what's happening in the Ukraine. And just as this country provided a place of hope for Ukrainians well over 100 years ago, let us hope it continues to provide a source of hope for people around the world. And I just am so pleased and delighted, but not at all surprised, that two very fine former members of this council, supported by the Central Vancouver Island Multicultural Society, would come before us tonight and make this request of council. And I'm delighted to say I don't think I'm misrepresenting anybody around this table who doesn't think that this is a very small but very important thing to do, to recognize that this city is a good place to live. It is filled with good people, people with good hearts, and we have an opportunity to provide a welcome to those who will continue to build on that. So thank you. Thank you so much for coming tonight. It is much appreciated. I see Councillor Hemmens wants to say something.
Thank you, Your Worship. If I may, always difficult to follow you. A question for staff or a request. I seem to recall that the banquet was packaged with other pieces of work with CVIMS. I recall a Living Speakers series of newcomers, and I'm just wondering if the staff report can also explore that past relationship, and as well as that line item that Councillor Bonner identified. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you coming tonight. Councillor Bonner, sorry, hand still up, or one more thing to say?
Dr. Bonner to you, sir. I would just add that, just looked it up, the line item is $4,500. So I think we need to beef that up a bit. Thanks.
Thank you very much. We have committee minutes just for receipt. We have no consent items to adopt. We do have a delegation unrelated to agenda items, and that's Kathy Bernard, melanoma and skin cancer awareness. And do we have Ms. Bernard on the, excellent. Ms. Bernard, if you could introduce yourself and give us your address, and you'll have 5 minutes, and thank you very much for being patient tonight and talking to us. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Your Worship and Council, and for proclaiming May to be Melanoma Awareness Month. My name is Kathy Bernard, and I'm the founder of the Savior Skin Foundation. I actually was born and raised in Powell River, spent all my summers in Nanaimo. My dad was the pipe major of the Powell River Company Pipe Band, and we were invited as a family every year to kick off the tub ceremonies and the parade. So I can attest to the welcoming community of Nanaimo. I have incredibly great memories there. But today I'd like to talk to you a little bit about a more sober subject, and that would be skin cancer. Skin cancer is the most common of all cancers. 1 in 6 Canadians born in the 1990s will get skin cancer in their lifetimes. There are more new cases of skin cancer each year than the number of breast, prostate, lung, and colon cancer combined. I know that firsthand, as in 2003, I was diagnosed with the deadliest form of skin cancer, melanoma, and by 2005, it had spread to my liver, my lungs, my adrenal gland, my bone, and my kidney. I was given 6 months to live. I would have never thought that my days as a child at our local lake, or down at the beach in Departure Bay, or my days on the softball diamond would turn so deadly for me. Melanoma is now the 7th most common cancer in Canada, and the 4th most common cancer among our young people ages 15 to 29. It is one of the few cancer with incident rates on the rise amongst Canadians. Exposure to UV radiation through exposure to sunlight, tanning beds, and sun lamps appears to be a major risk factor for melanoma. Your skin is the largest organ of your body, and it's the one organ that we can see, or someone around us will see. Early detection and prevention is key to this type of cancer. No cancer, including melanoma, can ever be prevented with 100% certainty, but the good news with melanoma is that the risk factors are well known, so steps can be taken to dramatically reduce your risk of developing this deadly cancer. So I'd like to leave you today with a few tips for the spring and summer to protect yourself. Always have your sunscreen with you so you can apply it whenever an unplanned outdoor activity arises. Use a sunscreen with an SPF of at least 30 whenever you are outdoors, even on those gray days. Wear protective clothing and long sleeves, hats and sunglasses. Check for changes in moles, new moles, and see your doctor immediately if anything is suspicious. Limit your sun exposure between 10 and 4 and never use a tanning bed. Get a cancer-related checkup by a doctor, including skin examination, every 3 years between the ages 20 and 40, and annually for those 40 and older. If you see something suspicious, see your doctor immediately. I'd like to tell you a little bit about Save Your Skin Foundation. We are a patient-led, not-for-profit organization founded by my family and myself in 2006 here in British Columbia. We are dedicated to the fight against non-melanoma skin cancers, melanoma, and ocular melanoma through education, advocacy, and awareness initiatives across Canada. Save Your Skin provides a community of oncology patient and caregiver support throughout the entire continuum of care, from prevention and diagnosis to survivors. We are the leading melanoma organization in Canada, and we work with other patient advocacy groups in Canada, US, and Europe in all different cancers. We are very unique in what we do. We will move patients and pay for all their expenses. We've had a patient from Nanaimo that needed to get over to the Lower Mainland. We will pick up taxis, food, accommodation, ferry costs, whatever those costs are. We have had patients in Victoria that couldn't get treatment here, had to go into the US. We will pay for flight, accommodations, and all their expenses. So we don't only support them in their financial needs, but also their emotional needs. So I would really like to thank you for proclaiming May Melanoma Awareness Month and for helping us spread the word about this type of cancer. Thank you so much.
Ms. Bernard, thank you so much, and appreciate, to use the modern term, the journey you've had and the impact that it has turned out to have given for so many other people, and the comfort you've provided for so many people through that work and the work of all those who work with you. I think it's fair to say that the subject of skin cancer and melanoma touches very closely some people here tonight, and your time and your effort is appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I'm not seeing any comments or questions. So the next is reports, and it is the state of the Nanaimo economy. And Mr. Corson, you're going to provide an introduction, and then we're going to hear from Ms. Manhas. Please.
That's great. Thanks, Your Worship. Yeah, I'm just going to quickly hand this over to Ms. Manhas, who's going to provide you with the summary of the economic development section's great work they've done on the State of the Economy report. This year's report has some really interesting findings. And a lot of the work that Ms. Manhas has been doing has been built into our Reimagine Nanaimo process and the city plan, as well as our economic development strategy. So I'll leave it to Ms. Manhas to show you about the good news we have for Nanaimo tonight. Thank you.
Ms. Manhas, nice to see you. Welcome. Looking forward to this very much.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council, and thank you, Mr. Corson, for the introduction. This year, in addition to the third State of Economy report, we also produced what's called a condensed version. It's called Nanaimo Insights, and this captures some of the most significant changes from last year. It's just meant to make it a little bit more easier reading for you guys. So tonight, I'm going to touch on some high-level trends from 2021. The full State of the Economy report is available on the Invest Nanaimo website. I also wanted to mention that soon we're going to be launching some new economic development content on the city's website. It's going to have some really exciting interactive tools as well. So stay tuned for that. Next slide, please. So after hitting the COVID bottom in 2020, 2021 started showing many signs of recovery and optimism as more and more of the population was becoming vaccinated and COVID restrictions were lifting. According to the 2021 census, Nanaimo was in the top 5 fastest growing urban centers across Canada. That's really great. Our growth rate was twice as fast as the nation's growth rate. Nanaimo grew at 10.3%, Canada grew at 5.2%, BC was about 7.6%. And of course, during these 5 years, the number of dwellings also increased by 10.4%, so nearly the same percentage as the population growth. So what does all this mean in terms of implications? Well, growth can provide both opportunities and challenges. Newcomers increase the demand for retail and personal services, which helps out our existing businesses. But growth can also strain existing infrastructure. And this infrastructure could be recreational facilities, transportation infrastructure, housing availability, and affordability. And of course, as you all know, we're planning for that growth right now with the Reimagine Nanaimo process. Next slide, please. So population growth is driven by 2 factors, natural increase and migration. Our natural growth rate nets about minus 700 persons annually. So the fact that we're growing is due to migration. In 2020, 3,197 new residents relocated to the Regional District of Nanaimo. International migration was 49% below the year before, and this was of course due to pandemic-related travel restrictions. Vast majority of the migrants in that year came from other provinces. We just got the 2021 migration data. It wasn't released at the time of this publication, but we see even stronger gains in terms of migrants moving to Nanaimo. The total was 3,617 people, and close to 1,600 of those people moved here from other parts of British Columbia. So Nanaimo, as well as BC's economic growth, is really dependent on having enough skilled and qualified people to meet our labor needs. The largest population growth over the next decade is projected in the 25 to 44 age category. This category is expected to grow by about 25%. And this is really great because historically the category that grew the largest all the time was the 65 plus age category. And of course, this demographic shift is going to lead to some structural changes in the economy over time, because a younger population always demands different products and services as well as amenities. So things like nightlife or having more schools for the younger families will become more important. Due to projected population growth, infrastructure investments and housing is going to remain a priority for the coming number of years. In terms of looking at the BC's migration, international migration is really the main source of growth for British Columbia each year. So of course there was a large decline in international migrants in 2019 and 2020, and this was due to pandemic-related restrictions. However, this decline was offset by stronger gains in interprovincial migration. On average, Nanaimo captures about 5.5% of total migrants that come to British Columbia. Next slide, please. Business licenses. In 2021, Nanaimo had 6,214 licensed businesses. The largest number of business licenses were held by the construction sector, followed by professional, scientific, and technical services, and then the retail sector. Net business licenses declined by 67 in 2021. This represented about a 1% decline from the year before. COVID-19 impacts were uneven across different sectors of the economy. We found that sectors that could easily adapt to remote working conditions tended to do better than their other counterparts. So the largest growth in terms of business licenses was in the healthcare and social services sectors, as well as retail. The largest declines were in sectors such as other services, which included personal services. So that would be like hairdressing places or personal training, those kinds of services, as well as arts and entertainment. There was a decline of 18 businesses in that. But these fluctuations, they really reflect the impacts of COVID-related restriction on some of the hardest hit sectors in the economy, and we expect this to readjust again as the economy starts to improve. Home-based businesses also represented 41% of the total businesses in Nanaimo last year, and this is an increase of 4% since the pandemic started. Next slide, please. For building permits, at $272 million, building permit values increased by 12% in 2021, making it the second highest year on record. And then this increase was mainly driven by non-residential projects. Those include commercial, industrial, and public projects. Non-residential projects accounted for 30% of the total building permit values in 2021. And this was compared with 15% the year before. And more capital investment aligns with periods of stronger economic growth, so it's great to see that. And of course, as you were just mentioning earlier on, the first quarter of 2022, we're seeing huge, no stopping in terms of growth in our economy. So in 2020 and in 2021, there were 35 projects that had a minimum value of $2 million or more. Next slide, please. Housing starts. Like building permits, they're a leading indicator of economic activity. In 2021, new housing starts increased by 50% to 1,036, compared with 690 starts in 2020. The trend towards denser forms of housing also intensified in 2021. 75% of all the new housing starts were apartment type of dwellings. All others combined accounted for about 25% of all new builds. So between 2016 and 2021, the city of Nanaimo issued building permits for 6,463 dwelling units. So we're keeping up with the population growth, although it's a struggle for sure. As the city grows, the mix of housing has been changing. In 2021, 62% of all built housing was single family or semi-detached. 36% were apartments, low high-rise type of buildings, and 2% were movable dwellings. Next slide, please. So the housing market was also very, very hot in 2021. The benchmark price of an average single-family detached home in Nanaimo increased by 22%. So if we looked at October 2021 compared to 2020, that's a significant increase. In Victoria, that increase was 27%. In Vancouver, it was 21%. And prices for townhouses increased by 22% in Nanaimo, 24% in Victoria, and 20% in Vancouver. Apartment prices increased by 23% in Nanaimo, and 15% in Victoria, and 9% in Vancouver. And of course, so what was accelerating these prices? It was increase in demand, low inventory levels. More people were working from home, so they started to look for bigger spaces as well. Of course, also we had lower interest rates as well, which enticed more people to go into the housing market. Prices of new houses increased by 1% in 2021. The prices increase for new housing in Victoria and Vancouver was around 6%. So certainly the new housing market didn't accelerate as much in price as the existing stock. Despite this, a new single-family detached home in Nanaimo costs you roughly 1/3 the price of Vancouver and 3/4 the price of Victoria. Next slide, please. This is a look at the rental market. In 2021, 67% of housing in Nanaimo was occupied by people that were living in those houses and 33% by people who were renting. Overall, average rents in Nanaimo increased by 7.7% in 2021, and the vacancy rate increased from 1% to 1.6%. Vacancy rates in Victoria decreased from 2.2 to 1%, and in Vancouver from 2.6 to 1.2%. The number of units that were in the rental supply in 2021 increased by 212. This was about a 5.1% increase from the year before. The supply of units in Victoria and Vancouver were slower compared to the year before. Overall, average rent for a 2-bedroom apartment increased by 7% in Nanaimo, and in Greater Victoria it increased by 4%, and in Greater Vancouver by 2%. Next slide, please. So this is a look at seniors housing. There was a increase in overall supply of units in 2021. The number of residents that were going into seniors homes was actually declining, or it had a moderate increase in some of the areas. And this really led to higher vacancy rates across most regions in British Columbia as well as across Canada. The weak demand was likely due to the reluctance of households to move into seniors housing during the COVID situation. And overall vacancy rates for senior housing spaces increased from 5.8 to 9.1% in 2021 in Nanaimo. There wasn't much change in the rental rates. It was a negligible change. Due to stronger demand in the lower rent categories, so if you look at bachelor and studio type of spaces, the vacancy rate was much, much lower. It was 1.3%. In the central Vancouver Island area, which includes Nanaimo and Parksville, we had 2,857 units that were in supply. This was an increase of 26 units from the year before. When we look at vacancy rates across BC, BC's vacancy rate increased from 5.1 to 12.5%. Victoria from 2.1 to 13.9%. Lower Mainland from 4.7 to 14.7%. So really high vacancy rates last year. Even though the vacancy rates were considerably higher, average rents didn't really budge much in British Columbia. There was also 877 new spaces that were added to seniors' homes. Most of those were in the Lower Mainland last year. Next slide, please. This is a look at labor force by industry sectors. Most of the jobs in Nanaimo are provided by the service producing sector, about 83% of them actually. The goods producing sector provides 17% of the total jobs. That's what you see there in the gold. In 2021, the greatest number of jobs were provided by the healthcare and social assistance sector, followed by retail, and then accommodation and food services, and then construction, and then educational services. And out of these top 5 sectors for Nanaimo, accommodation and the tourism sector were the ones that were the hardest hit. Next slide, please. So this is a look at the labor force growth rate. In 2021, there were 62,200 people that were in the labor force in Nanaimo. The labor force growth rate shrunk by 1.6% in Nanaimo. It grew by 1.3% on Vancouver Island and 3.9% in BC. Although the pandemic led to unusually high unemployment rates throughout 2020, as the restrictions were lifting, we saw that many sectors of the economy were reporting labor shortages. Nanaimo's unemployment rate was 6.1% for last year. This was slightly higher than Vancouver Island's unemployment rate, and it was below BC and Canada. Next slide, please. We did a little bit of a deeper dive into looking at job postings. New job postings in the city of Nanaimo grew by 45.2% in 2021. In BC, they grew by 33%. The increases in job vacancy rates were because the number of job openings were growing a lot faster. Thank you. We're growing a lot faster than employers were able to fill those positions. Factors contributing to labor shortages included slowdown in migration, reluctance to return to work for employees that were working in the hospitality sector. There were also a lot of government financial supports that were available, and many of the former workers that worked in some sectors like the tourism sector, for instance, they opted for career changes because there were more government supports that were available for up training. So if we look at the chart on the lower left-hand side, that's looking at job postings by regional districts on Vancouver Island. You can see that after the Capital Region, Nanaimo Regional District had the highest number of job openings. Our growth rate was 42.3%. Victoria was 31.3% over the year. And the chart on the lower right-hand side, that's the top 5 employers by postings in 2021 in Nanaimo. So VIHA provided the most jobs, that was 780. McDonald's 153 after that, Lowe's 148, and VIU at 119, and so on. And most of these job openings, they were full-time positions. In fact, 57% of them. A further 20% were where the applicants could choose whether they wanted to work full-time or whether they wanted to work part-time. There was significant growth in that category because as the labor market became more and more restricted, employers were being more flexible with in terms of, whether employees wanted to work part-time or full-time. Wages were also increasing slightly as well. Next slide, please. So on the left there, you see highest postings by occupation were for retail salespersons, followed by registered nurses, and then cooks, and then customer service representatives. And on the right, we have a chart that looks at the educational skill level of the postings that came out. The highest number of job openings required high school or occupation-specific training. That was around 28%. That was followed by college, vocational, and apprenticeship training. 19% of the jobs required that, and about 18% of the jobs asked for a university degree education. It was good to see because that was double the growth from the year before in terms of jobs that were potentially higher paying positions.
Ms. Manhas, Councillor Gusselbrook has a question.
Okay.
Thank you. It was a few slides back just with the vacancy rate for seniors housing, and it was like 9.1%, I believe. Is the definition of seniors housing like specific, like apartments or care facilities and that, or is it, I'm just curious what fits in there?
This is just independent seniors living cases, independent seniors living spaces only, not the heavy care or full care. It's where you receive, where you have your own unit, basically. You may have a meal in the evening with everybody, but you're relatively independent.
Okay, yeah, it's a surprising number. I didn't realize that that's high. So, I mean, if you're a senior and I'm looking for that type of housing, there's a good chance that you should be able to get a hold of it pretty easily.
I'm sorry, you didn't get that.
It was quite a surprisingly higher number than I would have anticipated. If you're a senior looking for that type of housing, you should be able to get a hold of it fairly easily with that level of a vacancy rate.
This vacancy jump was, if you look at the past, they've been very, very low vacancy rates. They just jumped in 2021, and Nanaimo remained below 10%, although all the other geographies, including, most of the communities across British Columbia and Canada, those vacancy rates jumped to double digits. And the reason was because a lot of older folks delayed their decision to move into this type of housing last year due to COVID, because families were concerned about them moving into these types of spaces. So it was a one-time thing, really, because we've never seen vacancy rates that high. And if you also look at the lower priced accommodations, like the one-bedroom units or the studio type of spaces, the vacancy rate was much lower. It was not even 2%. So there is a greater need in seniors housing for the smaller units, and that's what's is being built in the last couple of years because developers are responding to that. But the 2 to 3 bedroom units are not. There's not much uptake in that.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. So we'll move to the next slide, please. So VIU enrollment, overall student enrollment at VIU declined in 2020. It had declined by 12.5%. International student enrollment dropped by 55% due to COVID-19 related travel restrictions. And domestic student enrollment also dropped by 5.7%, and this was likely due to the move to virtual classes. So in terms of impacts, of course, fewer students means that there's going to be lower demand for rental accommodation, especially when it comes to international students. There's going to be a lower demand for tutoring services and decreased workforce in your community, as well as decreased spending. International students also pay considerably higher fees as well, so that means there will be negative impacts on the post-secondary budgets. The 2021 data wasn't available at the time of this publication, but we expect that the easing of travel restrictions and the move to in-person classes is definitely going to provide a positive jump in terms of both domestic and international student enrollment. Next slide, please. Tourism. Tourism sector performance was much brighter in 2021 in comparison to 2020. As restrictions were being lifted, population was getting vaccinated. The average occupancy rate in Nanaimo for hotel and motels was 56.8% in 2021. This was up 29% from the year before. Average daily room rates lifted by 17%, leading to 51% growth in revenue per available room. Airbnb and vacation rentals by owner occupancy rate also increased by 8%, and average room rates increased by 29%, and this led to 38% growth in available revenue per available room. Vehicle volumes also for BC Ferries, both the routes to the lower mainland from Nanaimo increased by 27%. Passenger volumes picked up by 33%. In 2021, the airport volumes also went up by 11%. VICC delegate days increased by 39%. So although the tourism sector showed a marked improvement, this was partially due to increased domestic tourism. The overall performance of the sector is still well below pre-pandemic levels, but with the most recent announcements lifting COVID test requirements, et cetera, that will definitely lead to better tourism sector performance in 2022. Next slide, please. So this is data that we ordered last year. It's the population count through TELUS, and they look at mobility analytics to come up with this data. Here, a unique visitor is defined as anyone who resides outside the city and stays at least 3 hours in the city. Total trips data basically reveals the number of trips that are taken by all of the visitors to the city of Nanaimo. And a unique resident is someone who's spending most of their time in the city of Nanaimo. So this category is really, the way you should look at it is it's real population in place. It's not necessarily permanent residents, but it's how many people do we have at any one time in our city. And this data strongly supports Nanaimo's position as a regional service center. In months such as August, the city's population is not just its usual 100,000 persons, but an additional 243,000 unique visitors. And a significant portion of these people are coming here from neighboring communities. They're accessing services and amenities in our community. And this population swell, of course, has huge implications in terms of the money that's being spent in our community, as well as the impact on our physical infrastructure as well. The graphs on the right basically show you some of the busiest visitor months in the city of Nanaimo. August being the busiest, then July, and then September, and of course summer and fall being the busiest seasons, followed by spring and then winter. Next slide, please.
Oh, Councillor Bonner has a question. Sorry, Councillor, you're even smaller on the screen than usual tonight.
Teeny thing. Thank you, Your Worship. Back to the last slide there. A lot of times I'm told by folks that Nanaimo is just a place where people come to get to somewhere else. So I'm guessing from what you're stating here is that Nanaimo is a place where visitors come and stay and then maybe go out somewhere else. But certainly the staying thing seems to be quite an interesting statistic there. Am I correct?
Yes, absolutely. And we will also be getting more data. I was speaking with the Nanaimo Hospitality Association. They are ordering actually a whole array of data that gets very, very granular. So this will give us information on where visitors are coming from as well. So I think that's going to be, I think they're planning on launching that in a month's time or so. So that will give us even more granular information than this, but certainly there are a lot of people coming to our community. And it would be interesting to sort of check how this data, what this data will look like next year, because last year was a pandemic year and we saw a lot of domestic tourism. So it'll be interesting to see how that changes next year, you know, whether people will sort of start to choose to go to other countries. And, you know, did we have sort of this growth just from, because people weren't flying elsewhere and they were coming here a lot more. So it'll be interesting to see over, you know, a couple of years worth of data would be interesting to see. So on this slide, BC's GDP contracted by 3.8% in 2020. This was far better than Canada's contraction at 5.4% and most of the other provinces. BC's real GDP is forecast to grow by 5.2% in 2021. That data should be coming in a few months' time. It's forecast to grow by 4% in 2022 and 2.5% in 2023. In terms of emerging trends on the business landscape, Canada-wide, it's going to be shaped by two different themes, and those themes are changing demographics and accelerated adoption of digital technology. So in terms of changing demographics, what that means is Canada-wide, we're facing an aging workforce, and labor pool will grow more slowly in the future. And it may shrink in some regions as well. By 2030, more than 50% of workers will be millennials as well as Gen Z. More culturally diverse populations is going to be the future over the next 10 years or so. Immigrants are going to provide a lion's share of the population. They will be a key source of workers for British Columbia as well as other areas in Canada. In terms of technology, growth of virtual marketplaces is what we're going to see. So more and more transactions happening online. We're going to see greater automation of business activities. We're going to see the rise of the data economy. 75 billion devices will be connected to the internet worldwide by 2025. So that is significant. So what does this mean in terms of the city? Well, as a city to be prosperous, it's important that we are retaining, enhancing that younger demographic slice of the pie, because this is our future workforce. So it's important that we try to invest in infrastructure that entices that demographic to be here in our community. And on the technology side, enabling robust technological infrastructure and supporting the technology sector will really make sure that we remain competitive. So with that, I will close my presentation and thank you so much for your time and your attention, and I'll open up to any questions that you have.
Ms. Manhas, thank you. Questions? Councillor Marmon.
Thank you. And thank you for the presentation and our state of the economy. In response to Councillor Bonner, and I don't know if you have the stats or this is something that may come out with tourism, but do you know the average length of stay?
No, this data didn't look into average length of stay, but I could certainly look into that.
But that will be more crucial, I think, next year, as you say, as a pandemic and the international travelers, that you will find that more and more Nanaimo is going on the map, and it is a destination because of our natural beauty. Thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Councillor Bonner, please.
Thank you, Worship. I went back to a little bit earlier, and I believe it's the slide on City of Nanaimo housing starts by type. Do we break this information out in terms of affordable housing, like purpose-built affordable housing, not what some of the builders call it, and supportive housing?
No, it's not broken down by that level.
I think it would be important for me as a councillor, and hopefully other councillors, when we're advocating to the province, to have these stats broken out a bit more. If it may be, I think it's easy to count the supportive housing. It's like 53 over the last 3 years. But I would like to know how that breaks down in terms of purpose-built affordable housing and seniors housing and that sort of thing, specifically, by various agencies or the province building it here. The other question I had, which I think is a bit concerning, you're saying that in terms of seniors housing vacancies, we were the lowest in Canada by almost half sometimes. And we seem to be the place where seniors are moving to. So are we going to see a serious problem with housing seniors who are looking for this type of housing in, say, 5 or 6 years from now?
This year or last year was very different in terms of vacancy rates. Like I say, they were not the norm because of COVID. Our vacancy rate, I would have to look at last year's to see what it was around, but it was it was way lower, but we definitely attract seniors to move here. Seniors housing is much more expensive in the Lower Mainland and in Victoria. Our rates, average rents are much lower, so I would suspect that seniors, we might be a destination for that, but we are seeing a lot more growth in that 25 to 44 year age category, because that's going to be important for us. And of course, it depends on what geography we're looking at. This seniors data, it includes Parksville as well as Nanaimo, and I suspect Parksville has more of the seniors population than does Nanaimo.
Okay, thank you.
It's a good point, though, Councillor Bonner. But the good news is Ms. Manhas has pointed out, the fastest growing demographic for us is changing from seniors to that mid group, if you will. And so it is quite positive. But of course, that doesn't get past the fact that there are a number of us who are now seniors already and in that category and may require care and seniors housing in due course. I wasn't calling for an admission, but thank you for reminding all of us it was your birthday the other week. Anyone else? If not, Ms. Manhas, how long have you been with the city now?
Oh, too long.
I was hoping for a more upbeat answer.
I think it's been about 26 years.
Well, I just wanted to say, being conscious that I know you have a long history here, your continued support of this city and loyalty to it is appreciated, and your hard work. Thank you very much.
I love this city, so it's great to be here. Thank you very much.
Mr. Corson, Ms. Manhas, thank you. The next item is the Agents of Change project application, and this is where you all get to ignore the fact that I happily announced this already, even though it wasn't passed, which Bill Manners will no doubt point out in an email sometime tonight if Bill is listening. Mr. Lindsay, please.
Yes, thank you, Worship. I was going to mention that you stole my thunder. And
I always preferred committing suicide to being murdered, Mr. Lindsay.
I think you did an excellent job introducing this. So I'm just here. Miss Pan may be joining us to help if there she is. If there's any questions about this program, but just simply, as you mentioned, we were successful in receiving a grant and just looking for your support in directing staff to participate in the program. If there's any questions, we're happy to take.
I was going to say, Councillor Hemmons has raised her hand. Did she want to make the motion already? Yes. Seconded. Councillor Gesselbrock. Councillor Gesselbrock wants to say something. Speak though? No? No? Everybody's happy? All right. All those in favor? Any opposed? None? Motion carries. Thank you very much. The next item is 2022 Strengthening Community Services Program. Ms. Mercer. Good evening.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the Strengthening in Communities Service Grant Program is aimed at supporting unsheltered homeless populations and addressing the related community impacts. So this is the second intake of this federally and provincially funded grant program. So in 2021, as you know, the city was awarded $2.5 million in the first intake of this grant stream for a variety of projects. So under this intake, the city is eligible to apply for up to 100% funding, up to $625,000. So eligible activities must meet one or more of the 4 intended outcomes outlined in the report. And the applications must also demonstrate the 4 things: the evidence of the need in the community, the solutions proposed are temporary and address increased urgent and immediate needs without creating long-term financial obligations, include new activities or expansion of existing activities with costs incurred after the application is submitted, and finally be capable of completion within 1 year of the grant approval. So this staff have identified 4 projects for consideration under this grant stream, and they are extreme weather shelter and support programs, food security and breakfast program, the Snuneymuxw Hullett Laleham Homeless Outreach Team Support, and the Community Policing Volunteer Support. So those 4 items add up to $625,000. And that's what the funding will be put forward for. So it was felt that these 4 programs were the best fit for this grant stream. An application deadline is April 22nd, and grant announcement is expected at the end of July. So staff are asking for council to endorse the application as outlined in the report, and we are here to answer any questions about the grant program or the projects being put forward.
Thank you very much. In order, Councillors Armstrong, Martman, and Hemmons.
Trying to declare a conflict as I'm a consultant for Colton Laleham.
As long as you're not voting and you're out of the room, we're good to go, Councillor Armstrong. Thank you. Councillor Martman.
Thank you. And through you, I'm just curious, under the Community Policing Volunteer Program, why would we lease a car versus purchase?
Thank you, through the chair. Good question. And of course, purchasing a car would be preferable, but the funding doesn't allow for that. So it's different than the 2021 round where you could actually purchase things like temporary housing, but through this round, it's not eligible to be able to purchase a car. So we did check, and leasing a car is an eligible cost.
I thought it would be something like that. Thank you.
Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to staff, I'm curious about the extreme weather shelter and support programs allocation, and I'm hoping you can give me a sense of how much we typically spend on those programs per year, and whether this is an increase, a decrease, or a significant departure from what we offer.
Good question, Councillor Hemmons, but...
To Your Worship, I'm trying to go from memory on how much we spent this past month on the emergency warming shelter, but it was nowhere near this amount. So this would be a fairly significant increase in the money that's previously been allocated.
Thank you. I think that's what I'm picking up on, and I'm curious when we would have any sort of conversation about what that expanded program could or would look like in the community.
I can speak to that somewhat. When we were consulting with the community partners, it was expressed that to have various extreme weather shelters is beneficial because you know, there's some that are appropriate for families or seniors, and some maybe for the rougher crowd who have more supports needed. So it is beneficial to have various shelters in the community to kind of meet different needs. So this would allow the city to support those different types of extreme sheltering situations.
Thank you. Your Worship, if it's appropriate, I'll move the recommended motion.
I was hoping you would, Councillor Hemmons. So moved. Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you. The next is the Midtown Water Supply Project phasing option. Mr. Sims. Good evening and welcome.
Thank you, Worship. Appreciate the opportunity to be in front of you this evening. It's really interesting to me that 2 years plus a day, 2 years ago yesterday, we suffered the largest sort of catastrophic failure in our water supply system history. And so in the last 2 years, we've been working extremely hard. Council reorganized the financial plan to shuffle a bunch of projects to accelerate the replacement of this particular main. And we've put together a project team, including very highly qualified consultants and early onboarding of contractors to develop the best scope possible. And so Mr. Squire presented to you back in January of this year just the overview of the project. We've developed the costing to the point of, you know, that we are today, where we find ourselves yet another example of a victim of global circumstances and rampant inflation. And so what we're requesting council is to just adjust the 5-year plan to mitigate the impact of this rising cost. So rather than building the project over a 2-year period, we're building it over a 4-year period, deferring some additional projects that later into the year or later into the plan that are not as urgent. I think the benefits of this particular project is that it really greatly enhances the resilience of about 2/3 of the city's water supply. So this will sort of not only deal with the effects of the premature failure or the potential for further risk on the Bowen Road section, but will also enable growth to occur in the north end of the city. It will duplicate and augment capacity for the single water supply main that passes under Buttertubs Marsh as well. We'll provide a dedicated feed to the hospital, and there's a bunch of other operational benefits that come out of this. I think given the costs and the pressures that we see in the marketplace, taking a measured approach, we're dealing with the highest risk and the most imminent risk first in the first couple of years of the plan as originally envisioned, and then the secondary risk of the duplicating the Buttertubs Marsh section is deferred by a couple of years. And so we're here just requesting council support to make some changes to the 5-year plan to accommodate this.
Councillor Martman.
Thank you. Through you, if I may ask this question, and I'm sure that everything is fine, but is there any concerns that we need to have on any of these projects that have to be delayed? Like the Duke Point Reservoir, for example.
Right. Thank you for the question, Councillor Martman, through your worship. I think the projects that we've listed there have been assessed carefully by staff and can tolerate a delay. And these were, in light of the urgency of this one, are less risk than we have in front of us. So they can tolerate the delay.
Thank you.
Councillor Hemmons, or you finished, Councillor? Sorry.
I'm Martman, but
sorry, Councillor Martin, I'm sorry, I'm looking at you and thinking. That's right, it's Councillor Hemmons, sorry.
Thank you, Your Worship. Councillor Martman actually asked one of my questions, and I guess I just want to explain the details. So we had a major break before we expected something like that to happen, so we needed to accelerate the work that made sure that a break like that wouldn't risk something like the hospital in the future. So we repaired the break, and we're accelerating that work that's going to make sure we have that redundancy in the system. But now the costing is turning out that we have to extend the date of that, extend the project life of that, as well as let go of a couple of the secondary projects. Is that accurate? Is all of that accurate?
That is accurate, but I would highlight that we're holding to the original timeline on the high-risk section. You know, in other words, the section of water supply main along Bowen Road it will be addressed and will be duplicated, and that one made redundant in the early horizon. The secondary risk, we'll call it that, the secondary components are the area south of Bowen Road across Buttertubs Marsh and up to College Drive. So we need to duplicate that main as well so that we're not relying on a single supply main to the north. So,
Thank you.
So those are the two.
We just patched the break at Bowen, right? Okay,
Correct.
and that's what we're working with some patchworked piping right now.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Worship. The part I have a question on is adding a culvert upgrade project in the amount of $55,183. In our budget, we have a line item 50150. It's Engineering Public Works Contingency Fund for Projects. It's about $200,000 a year. Have you considered taking that money for the $55,000 from the contingency for projects, as opposed to taking it out of general capital reserves, which could then be used for any other sort of capital project?
Through your worship to Councillor Bonner, the contingency in the general capital fund is largely, well, I say subscribed. It typically is subscribed every year. And so that was the rationale, and I'd probably look to Ms. Mercer to comment further on whether, why the general capital reserve in particular, but I think that was, the availability was there. Not a very satisfactory answer, but.
I think Ms. Mercer has something to add.
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't have too much more to add than that. It was our understanding that, just as Mr. Sims had said, that they felt that contingency would be used this year, and then this money would be a more appropriate funding source.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bonner. Someone care to move the recommendation? Councillor Thorpe, seconded Councillor Hemmons. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any contrary? None. Motion carries. The next is Council Resolutions Update. Ms. Gurry, welcome again. Good evening.
Thank you. Good evening, Your Worship and Council. Thank you. So I'm here tonight to present to you your council resolution update, which is a almost quarterly report that I report to you on the resolutions that council makes at your council meetings. So at your regular council meetings, you make resolutions to move forward the business of the city of Nanaimo, and staff track these actions and resolutions in a list and format them in order to complete them as part of our work plan. So before you is 3 attachments. The first attachment, attachment A, shows you a list of your completed resolutions from October 1st, 2021 to March 7th, 2022. And of note, on that list, there's 77 complete items of your resolutions that have been completed. And attachment B shows the resolutions that you have made that are in progress, and there's 11 noted there. Attachment C is an updated list of the last time I reported to you on your resolutions, which was on November the 15th, 2021. And in that update, it shows that 5 of those 8 resolutions have been completed, 3 remain in progress. And then also we've added this time reporting out to you attachment D, which shows all of the resolutions that are still outstanding, or an update on those resolutions since the start of your term. And it shows that 30 remain in progress. I don't have the number of completed resolutions since the beginning of your term, but it is in the hundreds. So I will report to you on that information the next time I bring this report forward, because I think it would be beneficial for you to hear just how much work you have accomplished in your term to date. So I'd be happy to answer any questions. This is just for information, but I'd be happy to answer any questions on any of the resolutions noted, or staff present could answer any questions that you might have that I don't know the answer to.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gurry. Councillor Thorpe.
Well, thank you, Your Worship. I just need to, and I hate to do this, I think correct Ms. Gurry. She referenced the work that council has done on these action plans. It's the work that staff have done to get these completed, and I really want to compliment staff on the high percentage of completed action plans that we see in front of us, despite working through the challenges of a pandemic. So well done to our staff, and continued good work. Thank you.
Modest, eloquent, and brief. Councillor Thorpe. Well done.
Sometimes.
I'm not seeing, oh, Councillor Bonner, sorry.
Thank you, Worship, and thank you very much for that, Councillor Thorpe. You're absolutely correct, and greatly appreciated. This is a last question for the evening, and it's also a how do things work question. And the reason I'm asking is in attachment D, we have the allocation of pedestrian budget to enhance accessibility. As I see it, the motion was to move, reallocate this funding into different areas and different projects. So when that's done and it's been reallocated, is the actual motion completed, or is the motion not completed until the work is actually done?
I can attempt to answer that, Councillor Bonner, through your worship. And if not, maybe perhaps Mr. Sims has a better answer. But when council puts forward a resolution to do the pedestrian work, like say a crosswalk here or there, it wouldn't be marked as completed until the actual crosswalk was constructed. If it is just to reallocate funds from this budget to another budget, it would probably be marked as complete once the money had been moved. So that could be something in the wording. What page number were you on, Councillor Bonner, just so I could look at the actual resolution?
This was attachment D, page 1 of 6. It's the second one down.
Look at that.
And we can answer it later if you want. I just didn't know how these things got actually finished, completed.
So they are assigned to staff. Once you've made the resolution, they're assigned to the appropriate staff. And once staff feels they have completed council's direction and intent, then we would mark it as complete. Some, we might have a different interpretation than you, so it might be complete in your eyes, but we're missing something or seeing something different. But that's normally the way it works, and staff regularly goes through and updates their action items based on your resolutions.
I'm going to put my money on you know what you're doing, and I probably don't. So thanks.
Thank you.
And Mr. Sims, I think, wants to say.
Thank you, Worship. Just further what Ms. Gurry was saying is she's both right. And there's, you know, on this particular motion, I took the transfer as complete, but the work is still in progress. So that's why it's left as in progress. Yes, we moved the budget. That was a fairly easy thing to check off, but the work is ongoing. Thank you. And I will inform council that we anticipated upcoming GPC to have that a bit of a status update on some of those projects as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm not seeing any further questions into this section. Ms. Gurry, Mr. Sims, thank you. The next is bylaws. Councillor Armstrong, zoning amendment bylaw 2021 number 4500.195.
Motion that zoning amendment bylaw 2021 number 4500.195 to amend the local service center CC1 zone to allow a liquor store as a site-specific use at 6201 Blueback Road be adopted.
Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. The next is Parks, Recreation and Culture Regulation Bylaw 2022, number 7340.
Motion that Parks, Recreation and Culture Regulation Bylaw 2022, number 7340, bylaw to regulate parks, recreation, and cultural services and facilities within the City of Nanaimo be adopted.
Seconded, Councillor Martman. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Fees and Charges Amendment Bylaw 2022, number 7336.01. Councillor Armstrong.
Motion that Fees and Charges Amendment Bylaw 2022, number 736.01, a bylaw to add the existing parks, recreation, and cultural fees and charges to the Fees and Charges Bylaw be adopted.
Seconded, Councillor Hemmons. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Bylaw Notice Enforcement Amendment Bylaw 2022, number 7159.16.
Motion that Bylaw Notice Enforcement Amendment Bylaw 2022, number 7159.16, a bylaw to add the fines associated with the new Parks, Recreation, and Culture Regulation 5 bylaw be adopted.
Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. And finally, Housing Agreement Repeal Bylaw 2022, number 7344.
Motion that Housing Agreement Repeal Bylaw 2022, number 7344, a bylaw to repeal Housing Agreement Bylaw 2016, number 7226, for 16 Wakasai Avenue be adopted.
Seconded, Councillor Hemmons. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. We have no notices of motion. We have no other business. I'm safe, I think, in assuming we have no question period. Motion to adjourn, Councillor Martman, seconded Councillor Hemmons. All those in favor? Any